You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast.
Have you ever sat down and ranked the planets in our own solar system? Or have you ranked the planets in your favorite sci-fi franchise? Well, if so, or if not, welcome to Systematic Ecology, episode 34, the episode where we share and rank our favorite Star Wars planets. We are the priests to the geeks, those humble, mild-mannered mediators at the intersection of pop culture and faith, and we're super excited to be a part of your listening entertainment today. And TJ, I'll share with you something I've been doing and geeking out on. Just yesterday, I went down a rabbit hole. I went down kind of this deep dive, exploring the standard model of particle physics. With our work of faith and science in our church, and then reading the sci-fi novel that I've been reading lately. And then I have a member of my church who was actually on the team at CERN that helped discover the Higgs boson particle, the God particle. And, you know, I went down this deep dive and spent a couple hours just exploring particle physics and quantum physics and just trying to wrap my head around, you know, the forces, literally the forces that hold and bind the universe together. And so that was super fun. And now I'm super glad that we can talk about my favorite fandom and genre, Star Wars.
That's incredible. That's awesome. But like you said, I'm TJ, and recently I've been geeking out on Demon Slayer again. Our friend Stone came over and got snowed in with us, and he had never seen it except when we made him go watch the movie. So we've just been watching through it again, and man, it's good. Gorgeous anime.
And that movie's on Netflix, right?
The movie, it's all on Hulu. I think just the first season of the show is on Netflix. I don't think they have the movie, but they might.
Right. I thought I saw it out there somewhere. It was on Prime or Hulu or something. I was looking and hearing you all talk about that, and other folks here on Systematic Ecology talk about that being one of our favorite animes. I haven't gone down that road, but it's definitely on my stack, on my to-do list for sure.
Oh yeah, it's good. It's gorgeous.
Awesome. Well, again, welcome to Systematic Ecology. I'm Will Rose, one of the co-hosts, along here with TJ. And we hope that you enjoy today as we talk about planets. TJ, I have a confession to make. As much as I love Star Wars and sci-fi, when this came up on the schedule, ranking and talking about our favorite Star Wars planets, I'll confess I was a little skeptical. I was like, how are we going to do a whole episode just on planets? How are we going to talk about that? What would that look like? I haven't thought about that. I mean, sure, there are planets and environments I really love and bring me back to some really cool, nostalgic feelings when it comes to Star Wars. But man, a whole episode of 30, 45 minutes, or maybe 50 minutes talking about planets, how could that be? Well, over Christmas, I had a member of my church actually give me, I don't know if this is providence or God's divine will or the force working in mysterious ways, but I literally had over Christmas a church member gift me with a map of the Star Wars universe. Mm-hmm. And you open it up and it has the inner rim, the mid rim, the outer rim, and all the planets and all the stuff and how it's related to one another. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And so then I started deep diving on the internet and started looking at all these things, and clearly looking at all the ecosystems. I said echo because, you know, Echo 5 radiant, that's of course Freudian slip there. But the ecosystem, that's intentional. The ecosystems and the aliens and the histories and the cultures that are with Star Wars. It is just, it's an expansive, huge galaxy out there when it comes to Star Wars. And I had so much fun just exploring it. And there's no end in sight and looking at all of them. And I looked and studied and explored like 30 to 40 planets in the Star Wars universe. And I felt like I was only barely scratching the surface. So today we're going to talk about these planets, what our favorite ones are, where we want to live, what's our deep cut, all that kind of stuff. But before we get into that, TJ, we have a little game. I did I looked up on the computer. The computer's just filled with rankings and top 10 lists. And it could be top 10 favorite comic book characters, favorite 10 movies of all time, top 10, whatever. People love their top 10 lists. And so I did that with Star Wars planets. And of course, there's all kinds of opinions, all kinds of thoughts about what's the best and categories. But can you guess? I don't know if you did this deep dive yet or not. I told you not to cheat. But could you guess what you think the main consensus is when it comes to the top three Star Wars planets in its franchise?
Right. So I know none of my favorites are top three. At least none of my top three are the top three. But I've got to think Kashyyyk is on there.
Okay.
It's got to be up there. I want to say Coruscant, but I don't know, how many people are just like anti-imperialist like that and just eschew Coruscant. But the other one really, like, I can't think of a third planet that everyone would think is like the sickest, so to say. But I want to say Endor. I'm going to assume they talked with the, 30 and up crowd.
Yeah, right. Well, we are close. I think those three you mentioned are definitely in the top 10. Kashyyyk is up there in the top 5. Endor's sometimes in the top 5. You're right with Coruscant. Coruscant usually falls in the top 3, usually on number 2. The second best planet or mainstream popular planet. Number 3 is Hoth, just because I don't know if people would want to live there in that environment, but as far as like favorite planets or bringing back most people, I don't know what to say most people, I don't want to presume, but Empire Strikes Back is up there as their favorite movies of the franchise. And Hoth, that when we were first introduced to Hoth, that was kind of like, wow, what's going on? And then number 1, Tatooine, just because that seems like the hub and the wheel where everything happens. You have the chosen one from there, whether you believe the chosen one is Anakin or Luke. The Mandalorian happens there. Boba Fett right now, that whole TV show can't get off that planet. Tatooine, wow, there's so much that happens on that planet. So usually that's number 1. But yeah, you go through there and those are the top ones that hit the main beats of the top planets that are in the Star Wars universe. And yeah, we can look and see what people know. This is almost in the zeitgeist of pop culture. You say Tatooine, even if they're not a Star Wars fan, they're like, I know what that is. Even like we're supposed to get snow perhaps this weekend again, and the newscasters and the weather forecasters here just say, watch out, it's going to be, they'll drop in a Hoth reference or get you tauntauns ready, that kind of thing, even when they're doing the weather report. So I feel like it's right there in the zeitgeist of pop culture. So they're all part of that.
All right,
I guess,
I should have seen that coming, but as an avid sand hater, I could never.
I know.
I hate sand. It's coarse, rough, irritating.
Gets everywhere. Man, as somebody grew up on the beach, and we'll talk a little more about the other planets too. Yeah, it is weird. I despise glitter, and I would not even, having 2 daughters in the house, being a camp counselor, working with crafts, vacation Bible school at church, I just can't get around glitter at all. But I don't mind sand just because I grew up in it. I literally grew up in sand. I don't even remember the first time I was plopped down on the beach. So I could spend all day in the sand. So you would think. But Tatooine, I haven't seen anybody surfing in Tatooine. So that's why I wouldn't want to live there. All right, shifting gears a little bit. Let's talk about our favorite Star Wars planet, and then talk about our deep cut Star Wars planet. And then it could be one and the same or a different one. Which planet would you want to live on in the Star Wars universe? TG, go first. Let's start with you, and I will share what our favorite mainstream planet.
All right. So my favorite mainstream planet, I had an answer before we started this episode, and now I'm second guessing myself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll do honorable mentions later. We'll do honorable mentions
Yeah.
later. We can lift it up. Yeah.
Yeah, all right. So I'm going to go with Camino. Just
Okay.
the design of Camino was always so sick to me as a kid. Like, I don't care if it's just this one, like, oil rig-esque cloning facility in this massive ocean planet. I just thought it was so cool. And I love water. I just don't like sand, which, when the whole planet is water, that's a big plus in my book. And it's just, you play there a lot in Battlefront 2, the old one.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
At least I did, because it was my favorite. And it was just so cool. I love outside in the rain, always raining, so much water, and really
Stormy.
cool sea life. When you get to in the Clone Wars and you get to see Camino's really like. But I really love that planet. It's gorgeous to me.
Yeah, that's cool. And so that planet made its debut in Attack of the Clones, and as you shared, is the cloning facility. What's the alien race that's in charge of clones?
Kaminoans.
Kaminoans. Yeah, there you go, from the planet. And so the whole planet is water. Is there any land at all, or is the whole planet water?
So I'm pretty sure there's no land above the water. I could be wrong, but I definitely don't remember any.
Yeah, so it's kind of like Bespin with the Cloud City. There's a lot of gas planets in our solar system and in the Star Wars universe, and there's gas planets that don't necessarily have any land, and so you have to either figure out what you're going to do and how you're going to live. So you have these hovering crafts or space stations or things like that. So Camino is a good one. I'll share my favorite mainstream. I really like, and we also have within the Star Wars universe these habitable moons. So you have the big planet, and then you have moons that revolve. Oh, you guys know what moons are. Revolve around the big planet, and so there's even like speculation that like Jupiter has lots and lots of moons, and perhaps there's a habitable planet going around Jupiter, like that has an atmosphere and water and ecosystem, that kind of thing. So Star Wars plays off that, where you have these huge gas planets, and then a moon that revolves around it, and a habitable moon. So the habitable moon that I like planet is Yavin, and probably because it's when we first saw Yavin coming off of Tatooine in the original A New Hope episode 4, you saw Tatooine. Then you were set on the Death Star, which is no moon. We can't classify that as a planet. Although in one of the top 10 lists, somebody said one of the best planets in Star Wars is the Death Star. I was like, wait a minute, that's not a planet. It's no moon. It's a space station. Come on. But Yavin, you saw like this crisp blue sky and the green trees, and you hear the sounds of the forest. You're like, wow, what a cool planet. So for me, and that was where they housed the Rebel base. And you're like, cool. That is a place that I would want to visit and hang out with, or be on. So Yavin.
Another great map.
Rebel base again.
Yeah, great map in Battlefront 2.
Cool. I got to play Battlefront.
You gotta. Really old ones though. They rebooted it. Yeah. I don't think they're as good, but they're definitely easier to play.
There you go. All right. So what's your deep cut planet?
So my favorite deep cut planet is pretty much a ripoff of Camino. It's called Manon, which made its first appearance in Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic in 2004.
And that is so deep. That's deeper cut than my deep cut, that's for sure.
But it's pretty much the same. Water planet. It's where the Selkath are from, which the only canon Selkath in the series are in the Clone Wars. Their names are Chata and Montu, I want to say.
Okay.
And they're bounty hunters. See them in the Clone Wars. Cool guys. Fish heads. Amphibious. It's nice. And it's where the galaxy got their Kolto, which is what Bacta replaced.
Look at there. Look, you teaching me something. Okay. What are the roots of in the history of Bacta, in the Bacta tank? So that's kind of where they got that from.
Yeah. So Bacta is I want to say Bacta's from one of the planets in the new High Republic novels, because they're using they've used like 3 different magical healing fluids, and each one's just better than the last. But I can never remember like the newest one.
Yeah. Yeah, that medical technology, which shows up in the Book of Boba Fett over and over again. So still holding water, as you say, going around. Yeah, so that's a good deep cut. My deep cut isn't necessarily that deep because it was just in the Rise of Skywalker, but in that movie they visit another moon of Endor where Death Star 2 crashed into, and they're looking. It's called Kef Burr. I think that's how you say it. And it's that image, man, when they showed the trailer or the image of Rey and Finn looking at the wreckage of Death Star 2, and they're looking across the sea and you see these huge monstrous waves breaking. I immediately thought, as someone who grew up on the beach and grew up surfing and still loves to surf, I was like, man, that's rideable. Oh, are we going to see surfing in Star Wars? Are we going to see surfing in Star Wars? And she took that skiff across the ocean to get over to Death Star 2 and the wreckage. But I was like, man, there's a possibility we're going to see surfing in Star Wars. So that planet, where it was, I'm sure it had its problems, environmental problems with the wreckage of a whole space station. But just seeing that environment of the grass and the trees and also that ocean with those waves breaking, I was like, I want to go to there.
Yeah, it was gorgeous. That's probably my favorite part of The Rise of Skywalker. Pretty much everything else is tied for last.
Right. All right. So out of those planets, it could be the same one. Which planet would you want to live on if you were going to hang out or make your home base in the Star Wars universe? Where would you go?
So I really want to say I'd choose to live on Coruscant, but I feel like I would become a statistic pretty quickly, if you know what I mean, because I can't afford to live in the upper levels of the city.
Right.
That's out of the question. And but I'm going to ignore that and say I would choose to live on Bespin instead and pretend I could afford to live in Cloud City.
Yeah.
Because it's incredible. It is gorgeous. Basically the exact opposite of my favorite planets, but it seems a lot more hospitable.
Yeah. Yeah. If I was going to live on a planet, definitely Naboo. I mean, talk about the gorgeous water and the fields. I mean, I think visually George Lucas really, really outdid himself with that particular planet. Some other planets I thought of, of course, I revolve around beach and water. So I was thinking of Scarif in Rogue One because it's so tropical and you get to think. But then I was thinking, man, I don't want to be blown up on that planet, but if it was before the Empire got there and were doing its thing, what a cool planet that looked like and be a part of. It was really cool to see in the Atwalkers walking through the trees and the palm trees and this kind of tropical Caribbean-like environment there in the solar system. And that's what I really admire about this expanded universe. As I went down that road of thinking of all the environments and ecosystems that are part of the Star Wars universe. Yeah, they went from sand to then green forest, and then they went to an all snow planet, and then all these water planets, and then like you said, Coruscant. It's just riddled. There's no like organic life that you see glowing. I don't even know how they get oxygen. Maybe they just pump it through some air filters, or that's been dealt somewhere. And who runs the traffic system if there's a spaceship accident in space? What police are going to write up that report? But it's super busy. But man, there's just so many cool planets out there in that universe.
Oh yeah. I love the idea.
Mentions.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, shout out Coruscant, an unfathomably large city planet. That's awesome. I got to shout out Kashyyyk, obviously. Mandalore, one of my favorites. But, I'm not choosing to live there ever. Malachor
And
5.
Kashyyyk is another planet. That's the planet where the Wookiees are from. Chewbacca's home planet, and again, it's another forest planet. Lots of trees. They live in tree houses. How fun would that be to live in tree houses with a bunch of Wookiees? And if they're like supposed to be an example of like canines and partnership and loyalty when it comes to that, because that's the kind of root of George Lucas looking at his dog riding the front seat of his truck and going, oh man, would it be cool if Han Solo had a loyal friend sitting as co-pilot in his spaceship. So if Wookiees really are the dogs of canines of the Star Wars universe, who wouldn't want to live on a planet filled with Wookiees and tree houses? So that's definitely an honorable mention for me.
It looks so humid. It looks so humid on that planet. I don't think I'd be able to take it. There's no way.
And you know that Wookiees probably don't smell great.
Mm-mm.
I don't know.
It's not possible.
Assuming things. It's not possible they smell great.
It's not possible they smell great. It's just not. I don't care how much fiction is in the science. It's not possible.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Han was like the Tauntauns. He thought they smelled bad, but didn't say anything about Chewie. Leia called him a walking carpet, but she didn't mention anything about him smelling. So maybe they do smell all right. You mentioned a planet before I interrupted with Kashyyyk, but what was the other one you said?
Probably Onderon. Malachor 5 is what I was going to say. A couple more of my, got to represent the Knights of the Old Republic planets.
Okay.
It's entirely different when you get to go to the planet and walk around in it, which is why, all of my favorites are ones that I got to play on in video games. But Malachor 5 was just basically a comet, honestly, by the time they were done with it. Because a whole bunch of Jedi died on Malachor 5.
Okay.
And Mandalorians. But if you're okay with reading non-canon stuff or playing it, please play Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2.
Cool. Yeah.
But it's great. And Onderon is like a non-blown up version of Alderaan, pretty much. More or less. That's it. I think that's it for honorable mentions.
Yeah,
I could shout out.
Do we ever
all of
see I could shout out all these. I have a long list here. I'm not going to bore everybody, but Alderaan, that planet that was blown up originally in New Hope, and Leia talks about being a peaceful planet and had the outsourced of the rebellion. But I don't know if we've seen too much of actually the environment of Alderaan in the main movies per se. I'm sure there's some books and some animated stuff or even video games, but we really don't know much about the history of Alderaan and its environment and its play in kind of the larger Star Wars universe. I wouldn't mind seeing more of that. I do think that Star Wars kind of, in order to, and I'm part of that too, appease the fan base and scratch that nostalgia itch. They'll create new planets. They look a lot like the planets we love. So, you have Jakku in The Force Awakens, but it's basically Tatooine. You have Crate in The Last Jedi, which is kind of neat, but that's basically Hoth, except not with snow, but with salt. So it draws back this image of this kind of white mineral planet. And then you think of like things like the Death Star, it's no moon, but it's a space station, but shaped like a planet. And then Starkiller Base, it's they literally turned a planet into a Death Star. So is it a planet? Is it a space station? Is it both? Starkiller Base, how would you classify it as a planet? And let's be honest, we're still doing that in our own solar system. Pluto got downgraded from a planet to some exo something or another, and people still argue exoplanet. So people still argue whether Pluto's a planet or not. And they're still trying to discover the sun still has lots of our sun. We're still discovering things that are caught in its gravitational pull and orbit. So we may discover new planets all the time. So that whole who's the one that decide and classify planets or not. And but it's cool. It's cool world building, universe building, to think about these things and the environments and what it would be like and the aliens that live there. And there doesn't go too deep into kind of the evolutionary biology of all these things. But if we come from and that whole thing that they live in Boba Fett, like they mentioned that Tatooine wasn't always a desert planet, but it was like had oceans and water. And so, okay, what's that history? What happened there? The Sand People, the Tuscans, were the original people or beings or species there on that planet. They remember a time when it was water. So what happened to make it all sand? So those are good things to think about and explore when you're talking about these things, which leads to my point of at first it was like plants, which you can talk about plants, but man, you just go through a whole bunch of stuff through your head and imagining and world building imagination. That's kind of the sci-fi when it's at its best. That's what it does. It opens up your imagination.
Yeah, I do got to say, if you play Knights of the Old Republic on Manon, they do explain how the Cellcath kind of evolved, at least a little.
Okay.
You gotta, because you have to go fix some reactor under, the oceans of Manon, which is gorgeous, by the way. And your Cellcath guide is like, oh, there are electromagnetic sharks down there. We used to be them. It's not a big deal. Cool. Just don't try to kill too many of them.
Nice. Yeah, that's cool. Well, Joshua was going to be with us today. We got caught in traffic, not feeling well. So a couple of things we wanted to lift up that he wanted to share and chime in with this. He asked the question and kind of when we were working out the outline and thinking through this episode, that to ask the question, what do we think is better, or what do we like the most, or what are our thoughts on or hot takes on which is better, the CGI planets or on location real environments that they're using to shoot these scenes in these movies and shows that we like? What do you think, TJ?
So a lot of people fault the prequels for using too much CGI, and oftentimes they'll cite the planetscapes as CGI. They aren't. What they are is modeled. They're modeled, and then the actors perform the scene and get chroma keyed into this little model of the planetscape. And I think they look great. It takes a ton of effort. I can't really point out when one is there or not. And it's significantly cheaper than shooting on location and building a set. And then when you're done, you can auction off the models, and I would love to have one. Because it's so cool. But it's a really cool process. You can look it up. I don't remember the exact term, but I choose that over CGI and on set because you can get really fantastic and make it look really realistic.
Yeah, that's cool. And I think kind of the history of the creation of Star Wars, Lucas had to use practical costumes and effects and go on location for the original trilogy, and that added to kind of the vastness and kind of the eye-pleasing appeal to this. But he was also using big screens and models and using the top-notch special effects of the day to create the visual spectacle that is Star Wars. It still holds up. You watch it today, it's an old movie, and it still holds up. But then when he got to the prequels, he had the technology, the computer, the CGI, and he went crazy. Even before the prequels came out, he was toying around with adding scenes to the original trilogy, right? With the new release and the new theatrical release in the late 90s, he was inserting banthas and putting Jabba the Hutt in places where maybe he shouldn't be, adding scenes. So he was adding to the visual of what he could do in the prequels, kind of practicing. And then with the prequels, he used a lot of CGI, but he wanted that to be a different time in the history of the Star Wars universe. He wanted it to be crisper and shinier, and these shiny chrome spaceships. Yeah, it didn't look old and tattered and under the thumb of oppressive empire. That it was a different kind of time in history. And then you move to the sequel trilogy and kind of a mix of the both. They use practical effects. J.J. Abrams wanted to use kind of practical effects and costumes right along with the CGI. So it's kind of a mix of the two. And I think The Mandalorian and shows like Boba Fett are doing the same. So it is like what is distracting is the CGI, or even now the technology of de-aging actors and actresses who are already dead and bringing them in to the movies again? What's the ethics behind that? I'm sure if the family said, sure, yeah, use their likeness, use their voice, and use them as CGI and say Rogue One, what's the balance of practical and the technology of using those special effects to help us draw into the movie? Could be, if it's done well, I'm for both. It's not an either or for me.
I will say early 2000s might have been a little bit too soon to try and go for full CGI characters.
Right.
A lot of them like didn't age well. Like Yoda, Jar Jar.
Yeah. And I guess you could talk about that in real world, where we are in our present day context too. There's this emerging technology of virtual reality, of augmented reality, the VR goggles you put on and play games. And, you have the whole thing of what it could be at someday. Are we going to end up becoming like the movie Ready Player One and just live in this kind of different world separate from ours? Where is reality rooted, and where is virtual reality? We're exploring that and thinking through that when it comes to even our church life and community life, when we do virtual worship as opposed to in-person worship. Yeah, I would rather us all be in the same room, but when we can't because of a global pandemic, or we're going to get snowed in, or someone's homebound and can't join us for worship, then yeah, they can join us for our broadcast or virtual reality or live stream what we're doing. So it can be a both and. We don't want to take away one from the other, but the technology can lead us to expand how we understand the universe and ourselves. And even those with disabilities who can't experience the world, the real world, the same way those of us who don't have those disabilities, that maybe perhaps they can experience through virtual reality, augmented reality, a whole different experience of opening their world and how they experience reality around them and using their senses and abilities. Yeah, there you go. And, of course, Joshua, what we really wanted us to mention, and TJ, you said this particular song is literally on your favorite playlist and that you probably listen to it once a week. There's a song out there about a Star Wars planet that I guess is catchy enough that's still in your Spotify playlist. What song would that be?
He's got to be talking about Sunset Over Manan, which is from the house music album Star Wars Headspace in 2016. I'm joking, but that is a real song.
Okay.
And I do listen to it at least once a week as well.
Okay.
But
take note.
The song he was talking about was Tatooine from the Phineas and Ferb Star Wars special, which, I do hear it at least once a week. It's called We Love Tatooine. Classic Phineas and Ferb music. They do a little rapping, lyrically sound. They're just messing around in Tatooine. And they're brothers. They're step. No, they don't share a gene. But, Tatooine's kind of the perfect planet for them. As they mentioned in said song, with two suns, it's summer all year round.
There you go. Always summer. Two suns is always summer. And Phineas and Ferb, they have all their whole exploration adventures happen during the summer. So why wouldn't you want a planet that's always summer? Yeah, super, super fun. Yeah, we didn't even mention planets like Exegol, and who would want to live on that one? Or Kessel, the spice mines of Kessel. We didn't even mention Ahch-To, that place where Luke separated himself from the Force on this Jedi planet, that beautiful mountain range and beautiful scenery with I think two suns as well, and
Dagobah.
Water around. Yeah, Dagobah. We didn't mention this one, but I think probably because that's definitely in the top 10 list. That, of course, the main Star Wars planets when you Google it on whatever device you're on. But yeah, in terms of wanting to live there or explore, yeah. Yeah, but there's a ton. If you like the Star Wars universe, you like our own solar system, you like to explore cosmology and space, Star Wars is a neat place to imagine and project and think through. And I think it relates to what we are in our own world in terms of what we're learning in physics, astrophysics. There's even a major and degrees and people who have doctorates in astrobiology who are exploring the cosmos and thinking what would life look like on other planets in our own solar system and beyond, whether it's a microbe or whether it's an insect or a single-celled organism to a complex-celled organisms that have big brains and consciousness like ourselves. Maybe there's a planet out there that are all underwater, and there's, like the octopus. It could be happening out there. The universe is a big place.
The world where octopi grew thumbs.
Yeah,
terrifying.
Opposable thumbs. It is terrifying. Maybe they're nice. I don't know. Wow. What if there's like conscious? As we think about like the philosophical, theological, and scriptural aspects of these things, we wanted to share a verse from the Psalms. I think I immediately thought of Psalm 8 when I think about cosmology. I love looking at the stars and studying planets and thinking about the grand nature of the universe and our place in it. And so in Psalm 8, starting verse 3, the psalmist prays or sings or creates poem that says, "When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars that you have established, what are human beings that you are mindful of them, mortals that you care for them?" And so you can imagine the person who wrote that psalm looking up at the stars, imagining the universe and thinking about their place in it. And then Psalm 147, starting with verse 7. I'm sorry, 148, verse 7. "Praise the Lord from the earth, you sea monsters and all the deeps, fire and hail, snow and frost, stormy wind filling his commands, mountains and all the hills, fruit trees and all cedars, wild animals and the cattle, creepy things and flying birds, kings of the earth and all peoples, princes and all rulers of the earth, young men and women alike, young and old together. Let all of them praise the name of the Lord, for God's name alone is to be exalted. God's glory is above heaven and earth." And so as we think through these planets and solar systems and cosmology, hopefully they can draw you into the mystery of God and the creator behind it all and our place in it. TJ, anything comes to mind for you when you hear those verses and thinking about the planets and the solar system and cosmology?
I've always been a big planets guy. I've never been able to identify the other planetary bodies in the Bible. But it is, it's great to hear someone who can.
Right. Right.
So, no, thank you for that. Because I've just never been able to do it. I just don't have enough experience.
Right. Well, definitely in the Psalms and the kind of the poetry wisdom books, there's this sense of looking out at the stars beyond ourselves and being in awe of the cosmos. And their science didn't allow them with these, fine telescopes to be able to look beyond with their own eyes, what they could see beyond our solar system and galaxies and black holes. They couldn't look way back, millions and billions of years or whatever our origin story is in our cosmos, but they could use the science of their day, which was their naked eye and their own math, their own wandering imaginations about their place in the universe. And so I think humans have always been asking the same questions of who am I? Where did I come from? Where are we headed? And then what's my place in all this? And is there a creator behind it all? And does this God love me or not? What is my place in relation to the one who set all the stars in their motion? Which is cool about sci-fi because you can speculate, you can think, you can imagine, you can put humans in different environments to help work through those questions that won't leave us alone about who we are, where we're headed, and our origins.
Right. You can't forget the eternal human question, what's over there?
Exactly. Let's go see. Like Rey standing on that ledge, looking at the wreckage of Death Star 2 and going, what's over there? I got to go over there. And so she hops on her huge paddleboard and skiffs on over through the waves.
Or, JFK in 1965, pointing at the moon and saying, what's over there?
Yeah,
We
that's
got to
crazy
find out.
that we've been on that. And we're still doing it. We're making spaceships. Or at least a lot of billionaires out there are making spaceships and thinking about heading to Mars and putting our feet on Mars or other planets. Yeah, interesting. So we hope you like this episode. If there's a favorite planet you want to share with us, or something we didn't touch on that we didn't think about, our brains can only hold so much, and we only have so much time to talk about it. So if you have other things you want to share, let us know on Facebook. We're on Twitter. We're on Instagram. We have our own website, systematicecology.org, that you can message us and let us know, and be happy to interact. I think it's a cool discussion about what's your favorite and what draws you into the wonder of the big questions that we all ask. TJ, any recommendations? Anything going on these days that you want to invite other people to geek out with you on?
If you have a PlayStation 4 or 5, you should absolutely pay for PlayStation Now. It's a subscription service that lets you stream games, as in play them without downloading them. And there's hundreds of games on there, great ones. And it's had us geeking out over like 5 or 6 different fighting games over the past few days in my apartment. Most notably the Deadliest Warrior games, which were awesome. So definitely check that out. And if you don't have a PlayStation, you should watch the Book of Boba Fett.
Mm-hmm. I highly recommend that as well. TJ and I talked about the character, and then we talked about the first couple episodes. By the time this comes out, there's a couple more episodes that are out, and the latest one, Chapter 4, has so far is my favorite one, and really, really cool. So loving to see where this is going, and can't wait to talk about it when it's all said and done, for sure. My recommendation is if you have a subscription to Disney Plus, you go over to the icon that says Star Wars, and you click on that, and you'll see all the movies, and then you'll see the animated shows. You'll see the shows like The Mandalorian, Boba Fett. But there's also this other thing you can click on, where it's called Biomes, Biomes. If you click on that, man, you're going to get the environments and the planets. It's like a 12 to 15 minute meditative kind of hypnotic flyovers of these planets that we've been talking about, mainly like Tatooine and Hoth, and planets that I don't know the name of that are in the Mandalorian. But yeah, it gives you kind of the scenery flyover of these planets. And as I watch, I can't help but think about our own planet. Of course, there's a lot of cool like nature movies and documentaries showing us the how vast and diverse our planet is, and the call to take care of it. And as I see these imaginary ones in Star Wars, I can't help but think of our own planet and how we're called to take care of it, and how we're interconnected with all the species and insects and animals, and the atmosphere and the water and the sand and the sea, all of it, how it's all interconnected. So yeah, go over to Star Wars, click on that. They have another one called Galaxy of Sounds, which is kind of fun. It's just the sounds of Star Wars. And it would seem like, man, this is one of the nerdiest, geekiest things I've ever listened to, but it's so much fun. There's one called Vehicle Flyovers, where they only have like 2, like one a Death Destroyer and a Star Destroyer and the Millennium Falcon, but all 3 of those just kind of exploring, taking some of the major kind of music sounds out of these settings in the movie and just letting you see them on their own is a lot of fun. Very soothing, very meditative.
All right. Yeah. No, I love those.
Super fun. Well, thanks, y'all. Appreciate it. If you want to know more about us, hit the website. We also have a Patreon page that we hope that you can support us and explore. We'll have exclusive content through Patreon, some movie reviews. I'm going to hop on there pretty soon to share some of our comic book picks of the week. I've on social media been posting some of my favorite new comic book day picks of the week, and I'll be talking more in depth about what's in those stories and some of those story arcs and how fun it is. So again, thanks for being here, and we're glad that you could be a part of our solar system. And also remember, We are a chosen people, a geekdom of priests.
This was an Anazao Ministries podcast. If you enjoyed this show and would like to learn more about our network, be sure to check out the Anazao Ministries Podcast Network.